William Nottingham, built in 1902 in Buffalo, New York as a steel bulk freighter. The Nottingham had a length of 380 feet. She had a beam of 50 and a depth of 29. She also had a gross tonnage of 4,234 tons, and she could carry a net tonnage of 3,070. The Nottingham would carry raw materials such as iron ore, coal, and primarily grain on Lake Superior. The Nottingham was a typical bulk freighter, sturdy, and used primarily for the iron ore trade in that era that she served. She also had if you want to call it a nickname, as the Big Grain Boat. This again being for her primary cargo of grain that she would transport. In 1902, when she was built, she was owned by the U.S. Transit Company. In 1911, she would go on to the Great Lakes Steamship Company, and finally in 1942, she would be owned by the U.S. Maritime Commission. In October of 1906, the Nottingham would be upbound with a load of cargo. This was in the St. Mary's River near the Sioux. As she was making her way, she would actually get struck by another vessel on her starboard bow, named the Carnegie. The resulting collision actually caused massive damage to the Nottingham, and thus would end her season that year. Later, she would receive repairs and be safely tied up at Buffalo for the winter. Later, on January 7, 1907, the Nottingham, along with 22 other vessels, would be tied up for winter layup. This was at Buffalo again. However, during that time that she was laid up, an intense winter storm would actually hit the city of Buffalo. It is said that the wind gusts reached 85 miles an hour, and for over 18 hours huge waves would pound against the city's waterfront. The outer breakwall would actually collapse partially, and the water level would then suddenly rise over 3 feet. These huge lake boats would then be ripped from their moorings and smashed against the docks and bridges as well, and this would cause significant damage, along with 4 people unfortunately losing their lives because of this terrible storm. When the storm finally blew itself out, 5 vessels were aground. 2 of them, the Nottingham and her fleet mate, the Hurlbut W. Smith, had actually been lifted and then dropped about 400 yards up the beach. 3 of the stranded boats on the beach could actually be easily pulled off. However, the Nottingham and the Smith were not exactly the same. Salvagers would actually have to dig a channel alongside each of the vessels, and this would connect with more deep water, and it was over a quarter-mile away that they had to do this. They would then lift each boat and slide it sideways into the channel. After this huge ordeal, however, the Nottingham would be freed on June 28th with little to no damage, and she would then be returned back to service. Aside from these events, the William Nottingham would have a very good career, several decades of service, and she would come to an end in 1947, where she would be scrapped in Hamilton, Ontario. However, there is one infamous year that she would actually have a very deadly and tragic event happen to her, that being the year of 1913. Now, the Great Lakes storm of 1913, known as the White Hurricane, needs no introduction. Especially if you've been a long-time follower of my channel, you would know that the devastation this storm caused would be immense. Some sources state that over 258 people would tragically lose their lives after this storm passed. Additionally, over 12 ships would sink and be lost on the Great Lakes as well, following this storm's ending. Not long after departure from 2 harbors into Lake Superior, the Nottingham would face the full force of the storm against her. Both wind and waves were against her as she was making her way out across Lake Superior. Her triple expansion steam engine was working fiercely, and this would cause her to use her entire stock of bunker coal, which, I might add, would normally, under different circumstances, be enough to take her to Lake Erie, thus being before she had made the Sioux. The Nottingham pressed forward against the wind and waves, and the storm's intensity only grew. Not long after this, the Nottingham's steam from her triple expansion steam engine would begin to diminish, and this was the crucial life of the ship, especially needing a dependent fuel source. Desperate to keep the engine fires burning hot and bright, crew members would begin to throw furniture and wooden trimming from within her into the fires. This strategy would only last for so long, and then the coal passers and firemen aboard the Nottingham would begin hauling up the cargo of Minnesota wheat, and they would throw this into the fires to keep her engines burning. This battle aboard the William Nottingham was crucial, especially for the lives of her crew and their survival. However, eventually their efforts would fail. The alternative fuel source that the crew members were using just simply did not give off enough heat to keep the steam up. And on the 11th, the Nottingham was finally tossed on a reef near Sandy Island. The William Nottingham was now stranded on a reef in Whitefish Bay, between the Sandy and Parison Islands. Huge waves would continue to smash against her hull, actually buckling some of her steel plates. The Nottingham was at the mercy of the White Hurricane and its terrible elements of the storm. Time was running out, and the crew had to make a decision. Finally, 3 crew members bravely volunteered to leave the ship on a lifeboat to search for help. However, while they were being lowered into the water, a massive wave would smash into them, throwing their lifeboat into the side of the ship. The men would fall into Lake Superior and unfortunately be lost. The rest of the 23-man crew, minus the 3 that lost their lives, would have to survive until they would eventually be rescued several days later. The battered crew was rescued with the help of a tugboat. The Nottingham would be freed from the rocks on Lake Superior around November 18th of 1913, and this was by a team and the wrecker favorite. It was quite the ordeal to free and refloat the Nottingham. She would then be towed to the Sioux for temporary repairs. Then she would make her way to Toledo, where she would receive her final repairs. The Nottingham would go on to continue serving on the Great Lakes transporting raw materials. She would also serve during World War II and after. Finally, she would go to Erie, Pennsylvania, where, with 35 other vessels, she would await her final scrapping, and this would happen at Hamilton, Ontario in 1947. And that is the full and harrowing story of the William Nottingham. Well, this vessel, I think, has gone largely unnoticed, especially during the 1913 storm, with the other vessels that lost their entire crews, or most of them. She lost those 3 brave crew members that tried to go for help. Yeah, I had not learned of her story and these brave crew members and their loss until I came across her story in my books here. Which again is why, guys, get books. If you love maritime history, Great Lakes history, get books. I know the internet is amazing, but get books, because I did not know of the William Nottingham until I came across her story in my research. And I definitely wanted to bring her story to view and to give these 3 brave men their just stories to be told. And we know very well the devastation this storm caused, this white hurricane across the Great Lakes. And yeah, 250 to 258 people losing their lives after the whole thing. Just immense. Let's hope we never have a storm like that again in Michigan here. But yeah, tell me what you guys thought in the comment section down below. I did my best to create a cohesive storyline of events for this ship. A lot of her details and what she went through, especially in 1913, was kind of scattered, so I had to really pick from many different sources to try and piece this together for you. But wow, just imagine for a moment being in this terrible, most terriblest storm, being out in Lake Superior against the wind, against the waves. You've used up all your coal, your bunker coal, that normally would be plenty under regular circumstances out in the lakes. Now you got to start stripping the wood within the ship and throwing the furniture in there, and then shoveling the grain into the triple expansion steam engine to keep that fire alive. My gosh, that must have been an exhausting thing to go through. And I applaud the bravery of those three men, and unfortunately they lost their lives, but they will no less be forgotten, especially on this channel. So, but yeah, I love you guys. I thank you for joining me again on another ship story. Tell me what you think down in the comments below. Any additional information or constructive criticism or corrections in pronunciations for names and locations. And I thank you so very much, guys, for joining me on this episode of Songs of the Great Lakes. Again, if you're interested, check out the channel. Check out in the description the merchandise website if you guys want to find something cool. It's there and available. Have at it. The channel logo, many other designs, my own personal designs, and from photos that I took myself are in there for you guys if you would like. So, with that being said, as always, God bless you, and look forward to the next episode on Songs of the Great Lakes. Until then, see you guys later.